Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Peter Houston.
And I'm Esther Thorpe.
And this week's guest is Heather Dietrick, Chief Media Officer at Outside Inc. Heather and I discussed the evolution of Outside Inc. You know, an outside magazine, from just being a magazine to what Heather called a fully integrated outdoor ecosystem, which is quite a phrase, right? They've acquired, 15 media brands, there's events, there's consumer apps, they do travel services, they do software. What ties everything together is this mission to inspire people to get outside. Good name for a company that wants to get people outside.
So you said last week that you studied Outside Inc. way
Yep.
back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they used to be a legacy print business, right? So Where are they at now? What's changed?
So there's a 5-year transition going on. It was bought by someone. He was basically a software guy. He built apps for that market. Where they're at now after all these acquisitions, we hear publishers talk about differentiation all the time, and rightly so. But for me, this is a proper case study on the integration of that kind of utility that apps bring. We've talked about it with Immediate and NutriCheck. Outside Inc. has got Map My brands for walkers and runners and cyclists and general fitness people. And it's that idea of utility, but with the content around it, all focused on these outdoor activities. But they also have events. Heather told me about this 40,000 people event in Denver recently, where it was this real mix of people trying climbing walls with a music stage that had Death Cab for Cutie and Cage the Elephant, which I'm assuming you don't know.
What a combination.
But yeah, brilliant. And the Flaming Lips was on the bill. So yeah, proper diversification, differentiation.
Gosh, I hope those climbing walls were drilled up really solidly.
Yeah.
Being the Media Voices podcast, how has the money making changed?
Yeah, we've always got to talk about money, right? So there's an Adweek article that went out in February, which talks about a 5-year transformation, first year in profit in 2025 through that. Total revenue is 125 million. And over 60% of that is from this idea of recurring revenue. Now, that's not just reader revenue. It's also, could be affiliate e-commerce, could be software sales, could be all sorts of stuff, the app subscriptions. But the revenue mix is interesting because that recurring revenue tier, it is tiered. That's the point. You can just subscribe to content, or you can subscribe to bundles of content, or you can add the app subscription. So it's are you a serious outdoor dude? Then get the app.
This speaks to, you can be interested in a particular niche of outside, but you might also be interested in multiple sports, and you can kind of be as big or a smaller part of that world as you want.
She used this brilliant phrase: skiers that are mountain bike curious. I thought that was brilliant.
They should sell t-shirts with that on. They probably do.
So cool. We should talk to Mark Ilka, get him to do mountain bike curious t-shirts. So, with between affiliate e-commerce, apps, software sales, recurring revenue is about 60% of the total. Advertising sponsorships, I guess, is the other 40%. But even there, it's interesting because she talked about, it used to be 70% of the revenue, but there's been this shift, and we get into this phrase, endemic advertising again, which Dale Lawrence at Variety talked about, and I've got to be honest, I wasn't 100% sure what she meant. But endemic advertising is the advertising that's completely associated with the markets that they cover. So for outside, it would be bikes or skis or gear or whatever. And then non-endemic advertising, which is this more general consumer brand stuff, that just want to reach that audience, that activity-based, healthy, getting out and about audience. And that could be cars, probably big four wheels that you can put your snowboard on top of. Or it could be telecom companies that are doing,
phones that actually have signal in the middle of the mountains.
When you're up a mountain, yeah. It also made me happy to hear her talk that print is still a thing for Outside. Outside always was an amazing magazine. Now it's quarterly, so on heavier stock, and she used the phrase keepsake, which I thought was really interesting. Ties into what we said in the print revival report. If you haven't downloaded it, get to voices.media/print revival and have a look. We ended the interview. This was brilliant. We talked a little bit about Heather's time at Gawker. I don't know if anyone knows that story, but that was they basically got sued out of existence. And Heather she was originally a First Amendment lawyer, and she was part of that whole thing. She talked about 18 months of basically 18-hour days trying to defend that case, which ultimately lost. But it gave us the killer quote, I would say the killer quote of the season, where she said, even if Hulk Hogan and Peter Thiel aren't chasing you, it's always tough times in media. just brilliant. Talk about T-shirts. It was great. It was a lot of fun and really interesting from a kind of operations point of view.
Okay, so you picked quite an interesting related story this week. How does People Inc. buying Austin Food Festival hot luck tie into this?
Well, because it's this events thing, right? So Axios was reporting this last week. People Inc., who does probably America's biggest magazine publisher, they've acquired this Austin, Texas food and music festival.
The most American festival ever, reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, it says it was co-founded by famed pit master Aaron Franklin. What the hell is a pit master?
A professional barbecue. I did have to look this up. If you're excellent at barbecuing, you're a pit master.
Wow. Well, that's not a title I'll be taking on. There's 10,000 people went to this thing last year, right? Music, live fire cooking, which I now understand, given the barbecue connection. So, Sarah Fisher explains that the deal's part of People Inc's broader push to bring live experiences to its portfolio of lifestyle brands. Here's the important bit: to create deeper ties with consumers and new opportunities for advertisers.
If you want to learn how to do this, you can come and listen to Black Ballad's Toby Orridine talk about exactly this at the Publisher Summit in just a couple of weeks, July the 8th, London at publishersummits.com. There might still be a couple of tickets left.
My God, it's almost like we planned
that was
this
smooth.
shit.
That was smooth.
The whole point of this event, it gives People Inc. a younger, more relaxed vibe than some of its other events. Their biggest one is this 40-year-old food and wine classic, which I guess is all old wine drinkers. Not in a Scottish kind of way, but more in a kind of fancy finger in the air kind of way. It's not about the ribs, right? It's about the event, people coming along. It's about the video that they shoot, social media, newsletters. It's everything that goes around it. And their events business has been growing. They've got a beauty and fashion event, which they've taken to New York. It's called Birdie. And the event in New York is Birdie's house party, which is kind of weird. They got a travel and leisure event, World Best, which they're bringing to London. And then a lot of their other brands, the very famous magazine brands like Southern Living, InStyle Better Homes and Gardens. Each one of those has its own events.
But this isn't a new phenomenon. Do you remember this happening pre-COVID? Between sort of 2015 and 2020, it felt like every single consumer brand had like an associated event with it. And then that all completely fell to pieces in COVID, obviously because nobody can have events. And you had all those publishers that had gone like whole hog into events that had got like 80-90% of their revenue streams from it, really ended up in trouble.
But I think it came back pretty quickly.
It has. It was messy in the UK. I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but it was messy here because of various restrictions and stuff. But I'm hoping this second push is coming with a bit more of an understanding of the value of the content side and that kind of, yes, the money is in the event. Amanda Barnes at Faversham House was talking about this. Like, yes, the events are the big profit pool, but without the rest of it, you don't get valuable people to that event. So you've kind of got to have that year-round brand, the content, the newsletters, the everything else that goes with it.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, here's an event, it's a great moneymaker, we're an events business.
Agreed. And I think Heather talked a little bit about this with Outside, where there's this inspiration piece. It's about making people think, oh yeah, I could be into mountain biking, and the community aspect to that. Oh, if they can climb that mountain, then I can climb that mountain, or I can run that marathon, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think the content part is a huge part of it. Spoken like a true journalist, I must say, Esther. Well done.
One of the other reasons everybody loves events at the moment is because they're really resilient to AI. Until we can get our avatars and send them to these events for us, which we're not going to do, AI cannot go to these events. Like, there's something that, as long as you can bring people together, that is increasingly valuable in a world where it feels like everything else is falling to pieces.
Yeah. The bottom line in all of this is that publishers are doing everything they can to build direct relationships. Anyway, back to this week's interview with Heather. I think I said this last week. I've known Outside Magazine forever, and I studied for a couple of months in the States at journalism school back in the 90s. Woo! And Outside was legendary for its long form articles. I talked a little bit with Heather about this, about John Cracker and the Everest film that came from his Outside article, and the Into the Wild film that came from his article. I think it was called Death of an Innocent. The point is, Outside Inc. now is a much more complicated, complex beast than it was. And I started my conversation with Heather by asking her to tell me, what does the business actually look like today?
It's no longer just a magazine. A lot of people might know Outside the Magazine, which we own under the umbrella of Outside Inc., but we have evolved into a fully integrated outdoor ecosystem, and it spans editorial, so about 15 media brands in the outdoor world, so anything from Outside Magazine to climbing to ski, to Velo for road cycling, Pink Bike for mountain biking, on and on. Events, a large events business, consumer apps, which include our mapping apps, Trailforks, Gaia, and MapMy, travel, and experiences. So all of those things tie together through this common mission, which is to help everyone get outside.
Get outside, yeah. You have an interesting job title. Your title is Chief Media Officer, which I'm not sure I've seen before. What does that mean? What do you do?
It is a made-up title, but I run the media business inside of Outside Inc. So that includes our media brands, the revenue lines that undergird them, so advertising, subscription, other forms of consumer revenue like affiliate, our TV business, Outside TV, all roll up into this role.
One of the things that I was really surprised by, I went to the Outside website ahead of this conversation, and I was really kind of taken aback by how many brands you've got on there. Are those all acquisitions?
Yes, everything has been acquired. There's about 25 brands across outdoor sports, healthy living spaces. And we're really trying to be the destination for the active lifestyle enthusiast. And about 15 or so of those are in the media business. And in media, we really think about us being the sort of the first stop where we are sparking inspiration and also providing the tools and services to help people get outside, have a great time outside, and then come back to us for more of that.
And I guess that's one of the things that digital media has done, is allowed that inspiration part to be married with the actionable part. So you mentioned Gaia, the kind of app side of things. It's, I've got trails that I want to go on, or I want to track my fitness and things. So bringing those two things together is, I guess that could never have happened before.
Well, in a lot of ways, we are structured a bit like the New York Times. And then in one big way, we look less like them. So similar in that we invest in these core content categories. For us, that is outdoor lifestyle, healthy living, active sports outside. And for the New York Times, that is, news, lifestyle, et cetera. And then we invest in these utilities. For us, that is the mapping apps, travel, et cetera. For the New York Times, that at one point was just crosswords and then became parenting and cooking and is now gaming. And this is where we sort of diverge from that model, where our core content categories are very, very tied. And it's important to us that they are tied to our utilities, because ultimately they are all living in a funnel that is helping our users get outside and have a good experience and hopefully come back to us to find that next experience. As the New York Times has pushed into games like Wordle, that connection starts to pull apart a bit more. It's still a very powerful business model for them. And when they cross-pollinate, all of those metrics that we care about, and engagement, conversion, go up and to the right. That is true for us, but the utility and the content is highly related, and us pulling that thread together is really important to this strategy.
So is the content, is it a discovery piece or is it a retention piece?
It is a bit of both. And it's also, it's not only inspiration, but it's key to the activation. So you might come into the content to learn about a new activity, see where you might go, watch someone else's story of, their incredible ski line or their trail run. But content doesn't just push you right into that utility to get activated. We have our own sort of content-driven utilities. When you think about how we tell people where to go, we give them training plans, we give them nutrition advice. Gear is a super important part of that. All of those combined help you get ready to then step into that sort of next step in your journey, which is really the planning. And that's where the mapping apps come in. Now you have figured out what to do. You are geared up and fit enough to do it. And now you're really planning, what is that route? How do I do that safely, et cetera? So it's all steps on a journey.
So you've got inspiration, then preparation, then planning, and then tracking or doing the thing. Activation
and tracking and getting our audience to see the value in recording what they did in our mapping apps is really important, as that is great data for us, so we can understand what sort of the next thing is that they might want to do and do well in. And then the final one that you didn't mention is celebration. And that's sort of the end of that loop for us. But it's really important because we have a really big platform and a big audience to speak to. But it is even more powerful when we can force multiply ourselves with our audience, showing, their friends and family and et cetera. Here's what I did. It was awesome. They are part of that inspiration loop then. And they come back to us to figure out, okay, maybe I saw a friend do that thing. How do I do it again safely, make it be fun, meet my fitness goals, whatever it is.
So is that like a live community? Is that people sharing their own content?
They do share their own content through our mapping apps and also through our feed. If you're a logged in user, you land on our feed on our sites, and you'll see a selection of content from the brands you follow, from the creators you follow, authors, and you're also able to post your own content. And we don't only sort of get that feedback loop there, but also in our stories, comments have become really important. Our authors have really started talking to the audience and saying, here's my exciting story. Here's my experience. Here's my analysis of this race. What do you guys think? What did you do out there? Tell us. And then that becomes inspiration internally for sort of the next piece of content.
We talk so much about passion in publishing, maybe outside the news, but when we talk about specialist publishers, and people, that almost that badge of honor. I'm a subscriber to whatever, Outside or Good Food or, movie magazine, whatever it is. I'm guessing that you've got very well-defined verticals inside that portfolio. How do you cross over? Do you cross over? Is there ever any crossover between mountain bikers and trail runners, or are they very separate?
Absolutely a crossover, and that's sort of some of the magic of Outside bringing these all together, because it is very likely that if you are into one outdoor activity, you're probably into another, or you're at least curious about another.
Yeah.
And we try to help you on that path wherever you are in that journey for that activity. So you might be sort of a double black diamond skier, but you're just mountain bike curious, or you do it at sort of a simpler level. And we try in each of those categories to have something for everyone wherever they are in that journey.
So longer term, I guess, or maybe not longer term, maybe you're already doing it. You want people to be members of the outside community rather than the mountain bike community or the skiing community. Is that right?
Well, it's really both. The niches are really important. Like the user identifies with them. I'm a skier and a trail runner and a hiker, for instance, and each of those things have their own identity for the user. And we lean into them and we go deep in the vertical. But we also try to get the user to see the value in being a part of the total network, so that you're really taking advantage of everything we have to offer, from the very first stage of you thinking about getting outside and doing that activity to actually doing it. That really means you are probably touching our content, potentially our training plans, our trip planning. Travel has become incredibly important in this space as outdoor activities, or like the desire to do more outside has grown and gotten more mass. We really think about how we offer not just advice on where to go, but the actual ability to curate an itinerary and book it on site. All of those become part of the value of the overall Outside, but we believe that your identity in that individual community is incredibly important. And we lean into those niches, with the expertise of our authors, our journalists, their voices, our coverage, all of that.
So your subscription strategy, or I guess it's a membership strategy rather than subscription, sits on Outside Plus. Is that, how would you describe that to someone?
So you can either subscribe to Outside Plus, or if you are not yet that advanced into our ecosystem, you could subscribe to just our content bundle if you're coming in just through the media properties. Or if you're quite advanced in an activity and want to engage with our mapping apps, you can also subscribe at that level just to a mapping app.
Okay.
But Outside Plus is the culmination of all of it. It is, first of all, a
Right.
better deal economically, but it really gets you to explore sort of the full offering.
So if I was to subscribe to one of your, say I was a skier and I just wanted to subscribe to your skiing content, I could do that. But then if I was also involved in running or whatever, and I wanted to get one of the apps, that's where Outside Plus comes in, and you're actually subscribing to the apps.
That's where Outside Plus would be a better value for you. Yes. And
yeah.
you get access to all of the apps. And so, you'd be able to decide for which activity, which you'd want to use. And, we see higher usage, let's say for backcountry skiing in Gaia, there are more features aimed at that. Higher usage, obviously, in Trail Forks for mountain biking, more features aimed at that, and a big community around it. And so, especially if you were interested in more than one activity, Outside Plus is a great product.
I don't know if this is the British phrase, but you know that the phrase "having your cake and eat it."
Yes.
It's the perfect have your cake and eat it strategy, because you can basically tier people all the way through.
It is, and for us, it also becomes a really powerful data story. So we are taking signals on sort of what people are doing, their level of intent, the kind of gear they are buying, all of that, which is really powerful for what we might put in front of you next, to be good at prediction, good at personalization, which is becoming a really important part of the media brands. And then it's also really important for our partners, so they have a greater depth of the type of audience that they are interested in accessing, especially a high intent audience that is really connected to sort of a healthy lifestyle.
Some of those brands that would be involved, that's some fairly high ticket purchases. mountain bikes or ski sets or whatever it is. The level of spend there is probably pretty impressive.
We have a business that is both endemic and non-endemic. And so our endemic business can be more performance driven, for partners who are ski brands, bike brands, et cetera. And it really ties to our editorial strategy. So for instance, Ski Magazine does a big ski test every year in the spring where they have next season's skis, and it is very, very rigorous. And usually a resort is a sponsor of it, in addition to ski or ski adjacent brands. And doing that editorial project then connects to our advertising opportunities and also the data that we're able to gather. We do that for bikes as well. So we're sort of deep into testing. And then we have a large non-endemic business, which has rapidly grown in the last 2.5 years I've been here. When these were freestanding media brands, they were mostly supported by endemics in their category. Those are super important to us, and we have grown those still, but it's also been very important to build a non-endemic business. Auto is very big for us, telco, tourism, very big, health and wellness, and any of these brands that aren't maybe core in these outdoor spaces, but really want to be adjacent to them and access these audiences that care about sort of fresh air, getting off screens, spending time outside.
So by endemic, I've come across this before, but never really got into it. Endemic, you mean specifically related to the sorts of markets that you cover or the sports that you cover. Non-endemic is these kind of adjacent companies like it could be Rolex watches that want to meet, skiers or whatever.
Exactly. That's right. And, there are a lot of auto manufacturers who are really interested in people who are into the outdoors, who have offerings specifically aimed at the outdoor consumer. That's a big category for us. Telco does really well, especially when you think about people using products that keep them connected in the outdoors and on adventures. Health and wellness that might not be squarely in the space of these activities, but they want to access audience that cares about staying fit, getting outside, all of those things.
So in terms of your revenue mix for Outside Inc., how does that break down? I'm guessing you've got advertising sponsorship, but you've also got membership, and you mentioned affiliate revenues. Is there a breakdown now?
Yeah, about 40% of revenue is advertising. The majority is non-endemic now, which is a big change. In like 2020, 2021, when a lot of these brands were coming under the Outside Inc. umbrella, like 70% of the revenue was advertising and the majority was endemic. So that is a big change that we've worked really hard on. Advertising has been growing that entire time, but now 60% of the business is recurring revenue and growing. And, that for media is both subscription and other forms of consumer revenue, like affiliate is in that bucket too. But that 60% is for the overall outside business. The mapping apps have more subscribers than media, just because it's usually easier to get someone to subscribe to a utility.
Sure.
And for the overall company, about 25% of revenue is in travel and event services software. We power event registration. Again, a great source of data for us, for our partners, for us to see sort of where people are doing these activities in like a race context. And then travel, as I mentioned, really important growing category to people's outdoor lives. There's a lot of, especially new entrants, aren't exactly thinking about like their personal best record. They're thinking about where can I explore? Where's like a new adventure for me? And all of that ties to travel.
I mean, you're really living the diversification story, right? Everyone says media needs to diversify. You guys are on it.
Yeah, we are. And, it's dangerous not to. Obviously, the advertising revenue is extremely important to us, but you have no one-to-one relationship like that relationship with your consumer. And you're in more control of that relationship than sort of any other revenue stream. And so really thinking about consumer revenue opportunities has been a really important focus. So we're not so subject to the whims of the ad market, which are subject to the growth of the big platforms of Meta and Amazon and Google, et cetera.
I heard someone describe it the other day as advertising in the age of Google not loving us anymore. Which I thought was great.
Yeah.
How do you sell ads in the age of Google not loving you?
That's an understatement, I probably.
Well, I'm guessing a big part of that is that you've got relationships at all sorts of levels, whether they're subscription sort of relationships or whether they're people using the apps, or, you know, you've got direct contact with people at all sorts of levels.
Yeah, we do. With the consumer, you mean?
Yeah.
We do. There are so many different touch points, you know, whether they are reading a piece of content or consuming a show on outside TV or an event, you know, that has become a huge touch point for us, is sort of this IRL experiential piece, which you see that trend in media. Like as people get more and more sucked into screen time, there's more of a thirst to actually go do something in person, connect to community, all of that. So we have grown these two big tent poles. One is Outside Days Summer, which is our outside festival, just happened a few weeks ago in Denver. It was our third one. This one bigger than ever. We had over 40,000 people at the CU Denver campus, and we are throwing both a 3-day music festival, but really a celebration of the outdoors. And so there were hundreds of outdoor brands, our partners, essentially showcasing and activating at the festival. And it was just like completely magical to walk around and watch people try a North Face climbing wall for the first time, or Costa Rica tourism had a like a ropes course. So just dozens and dozens of those types of things, along with music in the night. That's our big summer event. And then in winter, we own the Warren Miller franchise, and we still make a single film every year in sort of the Warren Miller tradition that we try to innovate every year. And then that film goes on a road show with our brand partners, and we hit about 100,000 people in cities all over the country. And it's, you know, you sit in the theater, but it's also a whole experience, and you're sort of participatory. And both of those are another big way that we reach our audience on a personal level. Not as scalable as like digital media, but really, really important to think about this experiential piece, especially right now. Like the moment is perfect as audiences want to get out from behind the computer and get out there.
Is this the most fun job you've ever had?
You know, before this, I worked a lot of news, and I have to say this content is a lot more inspiring, a lot less frustrating, a lot lighter, and it's nice to work in a space that connects to your sort of everyday life. So living in Whitefish, Montana, I'm into these activities literally daily, and that's a lot of fun. But I still am in it for the beauty of the written word too, and the beauty of the content, and the beauty of the stuff on screen too. As I grew up 100 years ago as a First Amendment lawyer, so defended journalists for what they wrote, and that part continues to be really important to me too.
That's a great segue for me back to the print side of things. I've known Outside magazine for years and years and years and years. I studied journalism in the States in early 90s, and Outside was one of the case studies. Writers like John Cracker with Thin Air and Death of an Innocent and all that stuff. And there's just amazing magazine stories that went on and became books and then became movies, and just amazing. And that's your legacy, right? That's Outside's legacy. How do you balance that with all this utility? Do you balance it?
It is balanced with the utility. The magazine serves a different purpose, and is still incredibly important to us. We just recently gave it a bit of a refresh and redesigned sort of the vignettes that are inside, redesigned the cover. The paperweight is now heavier. It feels a bit more like a keepsake than something that you're just sort of buying at an airport newsstand. But it is a great, great retention tool for us. It's a good acquisition tool, but a great retention tool. People really love receiving it in print still. Again, I think we're seeing sort of a bit of a backlash against digital in the market, and it reflected in a little bit of a growth in print. And we're seeing that too. It is definitely a showcase point for our long form content in the tradition of Outside, which is great. Also a showcase of like innovative vignettes that we do now, like the editor Kevin Simtang takes you through a city in every issue and sort of shows you how to get outside in a city. Like you don't always have to be out in the middle of nowhere, which is great.
Do you think magazine people in particular need to accept that we just live in a different world than, when John Krakauer was spending 6 weeks up Everest writing about what was going on? That just doesn't happen anymore, right? And that's not about outside. That's about every magazine publisher on the planet.
Yeah, you certainly have to think about how you make the economics of those stories work, but they're still really important to us. And I think everything has changed in media, at least in the 20 years I have been working in it, except one thing, which is there remains an audience. There is a growing audience for good, real, well-produced content. So the form factor might change, the delivery mechanism has certainly changed, the revenue model, but it all starts, I think, with engaging that audience with really, really great content. And so, yes, the magazine business has changed, but not that core factor of it. And so it's really about figuring out, how do you change the form factor a little bit? You're still in print, but like, how do you make it more enticing? How do you think about those things that are beyond that the big long form story or several big long form stories to mix it up and engage with how people consume content today? So it's certainly evolving, though I still believe in the power of like that deeply reported piece or, beautifully worded 10,000 word piece. And that's still reflected in some of the work we do. Yet we also recognize we have to meet the audience where they are, when they are, which means all sorts of other form factors in the mix.
100% agree with you. I think it's about mixing it up as much as possible. You brought up being a First Amendment lawyer.
Yeah.
You've worked through some pretty tough times at some pretty under pressure media organizations. I'm obviously thinking about Gawker.
Yeah.
And in a very different sense, you're working outside Inc. now, and you're not being threatened by some crazy person, but
yes,
you're making a lot of changes there, and it's changes that are driven by the market or whatever. How do you do that? How do you keep going with that kind of stuff? I mean, I'm fascinated by the Gawker story, but that'd be a whole other 30-minute podcast.
Yeah. For me, it has always been the mission. It's always been critical to be working somewhere that is very mission driven, that aligns with things that I care about. And so at Gawker, that was about sort of the freedom of true information, revelatory information. And through difficult times, we were able to have the company stand shoulder to shoulder in support of that mission. And though Outside is a very different type of publishing, it is extremely, extremely mission driven. And like every single person, whether you are, writing the content or you're an engineer, believes that we will leave the world a better place if we can get more people to get off of screens and spend a little time outside, whatever you want to call it, touching grass or digital detox, but just taking that step outside. And again, having people line up shoulder to shoulder in support of that mission, I think gets really great work out of people, whether it's easy times or hard times. I mean, even if Hulk Hogan and Peter Thiel aren't chasing you, it's always tough times in media. Like it's just, it's just constantly changing. It's a wild, wild ride. And so I think leaning into that mission as a leader has been really important for me.
Was that as hard as it seems like it was, the whole Gawker thing?
Yeah, it was insane. There's no sugarcoating it, but it was certainly worth the ride. If you zoom into the particular story at issue, some people have a hard time understanding sort of the defense of it. But if you pull back and you think about how the First Amendment has been shaped in its history, it's really all about these cases that are on the edges, sort of the edges of writing and thinking and publishing and all of that. And the idea is that you defend those difficult edges to protect the vast middle. And so despite sort of 18 to 24 months of 18-hour days, 7 days a week during that period, it all felt like very worth it. And I think it was.
Thanks to Heather for joining us on the podcast. If you want the key learnings from this in writing, just head to voices.media or make sure you're signed up for our newsletter to get it straight to your inbox every Tuesday. Next week's guest is Lily Bartley, the first content director for Immediate Media's Food Group. She oversees BBC's Good Food and all of the magazines across its full portfolio in print, digital, video and social media. We'll be talking about how she keeps all of those balls up in the air at the same time, and the continued importance of print. As always, I'll squeeze that in. And I love this one. Immediate is investing in its Good Food kitchen, and I want to know all about that. Why? Why are they building a kitchen?
The Publisher Summits are 2 weeks away, and there may still be some tickets left at this point. Depends how many people have booked last minute. That's on the 8th of July at Huckster in London, a great venue just down from Paddington. We will be discussing things like what successful publishers are doing to build robust audience relationships, which includes some of the things Heather talked about. I think we've got Liz Wynn from The Guardian speaking about how their investment in apps, newsletters, podcasts and websites has paid off. And if community is your bag, we have the wonderful Sarah Ebner, she's ex-FT. She's now an editorial expert and consultant. She's doing a special masterclass on how to turn audiences into loyal and paying communities. I mean, that alone to me is worth a ticket for you if you get an hour with Sarah Ebner on that. All of that is over at publishersummits.com.
Until next week, keep up with all things Media Voices by following us on LinkedIn and subscribing to the publisher newsletter. Guess where? Voices.media. Bye.
Bye.